Over the years, neuroscientists have been increasingly using the artificial neural networks in order to help understanding the human brain better by modeling the various neural networks within the brain. In one of my books, I covered the 3 most used artificial neural networks that the neuroscience community have been using for the past years. And today we're going to cover one of those topics where neuroscientists have used 2 specific artificial neural networks to help understand that phenomenon. The area in which these scientists have been using the artificial neural networks to study the brain is called the cognitive flexibility. Cognitive flexibility is one of those amazing capabilities that the human brain gives us. For example, cognitive flexibility is when we are able to switch environment, switch the way we're thinking, do multitasking, adapt to different situations, adapt to different rules, and more or less gaining as much as information as possible from the environment and adapting to those situations and people and environment. And so, as you may imagine, this cognitive flexibility capability within humans is extremely complicated. It's something that we do automatically on a daily basis. However, if you look at what the brain does and how it functions, it's extremely complicated, and we're still learning a lot from it because there are several different brain regions that work simultaneously to give us that capability. Scientists have been using the artificial neural networks to understand the functionality of parts of our cognitive flexibility capability. The part where we use artificial neural networks to understand the neurobiological underlying mechanism and infrastructure has been less used. To help understand the different neurobiological mechanism of our cognitive flexibility, the scientists have used specific artificial neural networks that appear to be helping studying at least part of those regions of the brain. It's worth emphasizing that these neurobiological computational models become much more relevant to us because the goal here is to see what happens at the biological level in the brain when we, for example, go through a cognitive flexibility capability in this case. And so it's not only about just the understanding the behavioral aspect of it, but going much deeper into sort of the brain neural network and understanding that. In this particular paper review, these scientists looked at 2 major artificial neural networks, one of them being the recurring neural network and the other being large-scale brain network. Like in any computational modeling and artificial neural networks, there are always limitations with either approach. There's always pros and there's always cons. That's why we always end up having hybrid solutions at the end, meaning to say that we combine 2 or more neural networks to becoming more effective as to what we are researching. Recurring neural network, for example, is one of the most pragmatic computational network that we have and we have been able to develop. For the recurring neural network, for example, these scientists have been able to train these models to conduct decision making based on changing environment and changing context. And this is something that we humans do on a daily basis without even thinking about it. We switch decisions based on different information that we are being presented, or our context is different, our environment changes, hence our decisions. Multitasking or switching rules and regulations is another way in which these scientists have been able to train these recurring neural networks, which are in a way artificial neural. While these recurring neural networks have been amazing in terms of training the aspects that I just mentioned, one of the limitations that they have is that they are not able to be trained to have multiple brain regions in mind. But as we talked earlier, when it comes to our flexible thinking, we do have several brain regions, including prefrontal cortex or thalamus, among others, who are collaborating with one another to give us that capability of flexible thinking. And in order to address these limitations of recurring neural networks where you can only have one region, the scientists have been also using other neural networks, such as the large-scale brain networks, where this model, you're able to train the computational neural networks to include several brain regions. In this case, as we mentioned, for example, prefrontal cortex, the type of data, as well as thalamus type of where the large-scale brain networks appears to help us with us being simulating the whole brain networks. In other words, when you are able to add different types of brain regions, it kind of mimics and simulates the brain in a whole other way. Both these computational neural networks model are extremely sophisticated and top-notch, they still do have limitations, pros and cons for each model. And for that reason, the scientists suggest that a hybrid approach where you combine these different neural networks would be a better option for us to study the neurobiological aspects and infrastructure of cognitive flexibility, where these scientists use neuroanatomical type of data to feed these neural networks to help train. And as a result of training these neural networks, the scientists were able to observe the distribution of brain computations and shape the topology of these artificial neural networks to match the biological brain neural network. While in a very short period of time, we have come a long way to use artificial neural networks to help understand the human brain neural networks, we still have a long way to go.